All right. Welcome to the morning show.
Yes, welcome back.
Yes, you look like you're just wide awake and ready to take on the world.
Yeah, today was a little bumpy for some reason. I don't know exactly what happened. I even took a shower this morning. I only do that once a week, to be efficient.
Yeah, makes sense.
And yeah, it didn't even wake me up.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you should have taken an ice bath instead.
I should have, right? We've talked about this, right? That's how you make money. Apparently taking ice baths.
Exactly. Well, welcome to the morning show brought to you by Helpful for Life. Morning close up. Oh, there we go. Looking sharp.
I need to look at the camera. I'm looking at the other screen. It's like...
I'm Reed Garcia, founder and CEO of Helpful for Life.
Yes, this is Ryder Richards, the guy who doesn't wake up.
The guy who doesn't wake up. The other day we were talking a little bit about the productivity trap, if you will.
Yes.
And just a little teaser. I don't know exactly when we're going to talk about it or when we're going to include it, but later that day, somebody sent me a video that was essentially talking about, like, completely unrelated. They didn't see the show or anything, and it was like, hey, here's the thing people don't ever really tell you about productivity. And they had a video about it. And I was like, wow, this is very serendipitous. And I was very glad to see it. So I'll send that to you so you can watch it. And we'll talk about it on a later episode.
Yeah. And then Reed did send me a nice one that was, it was basically like every bro that has a podcast.
Yeah.
That was a fun video. We should link to that in notes too, because, almost all of them, at some point they're making fun of, like, I take cold showers. I don't know why, but millionaires do it, or Elon Musk does it, so I do it too.
Yeah.
And it's pretty great.
That was a pretty good one. Well, so today we're going to be talking about stories, and we're going to talk about that through a couple of different lenses. But the reason we're going to talk about stories is because yesterday we had on a guest, Known Wells of the Feely Human Collective, and he has a podcast called You, Me, Empathy, and we're going to talk a little bit about that yesterday because I had a little fun story yesterday after listening to part of one of his episodes, and so we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But one of the main reasons I like to talk about stories is because of one of the books that I read within the last few years. It's probably been, I don't know, for 5 years now, something like that. I'm not sure exactly, but it's called Crucial Conversations. Have you heard of that book before?
I've heard of it and heard of it in glowing terms. Have not picked it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Crucial Conversations is a book that, for me, the main takeaway I got out of it is all day, every day, we're writing stories in our head. And the context of that book is largely about the stories we're writing about other people, the situations, and things like that. And it was pointing out that, hey, by the way, a lot of times those stories are wrong.
So wait, what?
Yeah, I know, right?
No, you mean you and me could be wrong about something?
No, that's not possible. Yeah, don't
this
read the book.
This book isn't for me.
Don't.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it talks about how, again, yesterday we were referencing how we're kind of like computers. We have these inputs, and then it's up to us to decide what kind of output we give, right? So similarly, Crucial Conversation talks about, all out throughout your day, you're taking in all these inputs about what people are doing, what people are saying, what people are acting, and what they're doing with their actions. And then you get to decide what that means. You get to interpret that meaning.
Yeah. So there's several processes happening there. And of course, I'm sure we're doing most of them without thinking about it one bit.
Yeah.
They're just coming in and ideas show up and we just run with them. So yeah, this ought to be kind of fun to jump into that. So yeah, I guess the stories we're talking about are like not our favorite comic book stories.
No, not that type of stories, but who knows? We've got the broad theme of stories. We'll see where the conversation goes.
Right.
I will say to the lovely audience back at home, today Ryder and I took a big step.
We did. We took a huge step
in our friendship.
Yeah. Reed texted me this morning while he was on the toilet.
Yes. That was the step I was intending. But also, we actually did a couple outline points here.
Oh, yes.
Not on
So
the toilet. We
no.
did that afterwards.
Well, I joined Reed. And, yeah. No, yeah, we actually like mapped out some stuff to talk about today, and Reed had come up with a sort of a good format for us to follow. So we're gonna try to stick to it today.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
No promises.
But I think one of the first things we wanted to do on there was go through sort of a recap of yesterday's challenge.
Ah, yes. Good save.
Yeah, and that's if I remember correctly, there were two of them yesterday, and one of them was about turning off your phone notifications, and the other was actually talking to somebody that you don't normally talk to maybe see what their story is, to see what's really authentically going on with them.
Yes, and again, if you were not with us yesterday, please go check that out. But let us know in the chat. Even if you're not here live, let us know about how that went, and we can see if we get some kind of conversation going, or at the very least, hey, check in. We did it, and we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. So, Reed, did you get around to? I know you had a pretty busy day, but did you get around to doing that?
Yeah, so with the notifications thing, fortunately for me, that is one that I had done kind of a while ago. I had gone through and I got rid of all of my notifications basically, except for the most basic ones, and which for me, that's my text messages, and then my emails. I have come only the ones. I use Gmail, so it separates your email into primary and then like all the shopping things that you don't want to necessarily look at all the time, and updates. It separates a couple things, but the primary are just like, hey, these are the important ones.
Mm-hmm.
So those I let come through. And other than that, it's like my health insurance app telling me when I have a doctor's appointment, and that's pretty much it. Maybe one other thing. And so my notifications on a whole are relatively low. But then on top of that, all day pretty much I have my phone in do not disturb. And within the new operating system on the iPhones, they actually released a new thing called I'm gonna forget what the name is, but it's a blanket term that talks about different types of focus. That's what it's called.
Oh, right.
So there's different focuses that you might have. So there's one for sleep, there's one for work, there's one for driving, and then maybe one other. And you can set different notification preferences, and you can decide to let, while I'm on the toilet, I'll make sure that Ryder can still text me.
This is primo texting time.
Yes.
We were talking about the habit stack yesterday or the day before. Yeah, that's a great habit stack. While you're sitting on the toilet, don't waste your time.
Exactly.
Send text messages to your friends and family.
But yeah, so I actually set up those spaces and configured, focus zones or whatever you want to call them, to do that. And yesterday I was actually tweaking one with my driving. I thought I wanted it a certain way, but then I tweaked it to be something else.
Hopefully you did that while driving.
Yes, while
Of
driving,
course.
no hands. And I said, look, Ma, we were FaceTiming. It was great. So I kind of tweaked the notification one. And then as far as having that deeper conversation, unfortunately, I did not get to it yesterday because, I was running around all day.
Yeah, and I think if I remember right, your Wednesdays are quite busy. So
Yes.
yeah.
So yes, that's my meeting day. One step that I took to try and consolidate and help myself have a better headspace and work better and things like that. And I know not everyone has this ability, right? But if possible, I encourage you to do this as well, which is constrain your meetings to a certain chunk of time. And so for me, Wednesday afternoon is that. And of course, there are some that come up every now and then that are at other times. But I have two consulting clients, one of which Thomas Lightfoot of Honey Auto Detailing. He was on last Friday. Come check out his music. And then another one is her name is Libby, and she's Libby's Kitchen and Studio.com. If you guys want to check that out, she does cooking and art and stuff like that. But I have both those meetings on Wednesday afternoon, and so I do with them. The first thing I ask them is, how are you doing? And let's really talk about it. And that's an important thing to me because I don't know how much we've talked about it on here, but the work-life balance versus work-life integration. And but yeah, as far as mental health, and they're both entrepreneurs, and mindset and headspace is extremely important. So I make a point every meeting to talk about them. So I guess I did ask them, some people, and that's just something that's kind of naturally built into my week.
Yeah, and I actually did something similar. Kind of went out of my Jesus, stinking hair. I went out of the way and tried to have a conversation with somebody that I have known as acquaintance for a while, and they actually kind of work next to me, and I stopped in, and we ended up having like a 30 to 40-minute conversation just about various things going on in their life, how business is going, some of their extracurriculars. And then, funny enough, our husband was downtown. She brought her husband over to meet me. And so then I ended up talking with her husband for about 20 or 30
Oh,
minutes.
nice.
So, yeah, this was one of the things of just spending a little extra time with somebody turned into something else, right? And of course we're talking real estate and if they want to move, and it just kept going and going. And we might have new friends that we bring over to the house on occasion now,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it worked out great.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and we didn't mention it yesterday, and certainly we don't want you to come from this place as you're doing this, but if you do this, if you open up more and you're talking with people more, like you are going to make deeper connections, and who knows where it could lead to. And you know, I wanted to give one little quick side story about how I noticed that happening in my life. When I announced that I was going to be leaving my company, Boeing, when I used to work for Boeing, I sent it out my email and talked about how I was going on this entrepreneurship journey. And even before then, I had talked to some coworkers and things like that about doing it. And man, the number of people who came out of the woodwork, and even some people I'd worked with for a long time, they're like, "Oh yeah, I used to do that, and here's XYZ, and I tried ABC, and like, dude, I've been working next to you for 3 years. This never came up once." And
Yeah.
but yeah, just being intentional about it and creating that space and comfort and safety for people to talk about things and share things with you. You never know where things are going to go.
No, people tend to have led several different lives, and when we encounter them in the workplace, we're only seeing one facet.
Yeah.
And that's pretty common, I think. Not only that, but it would be a little bit hard to go into Boeing and be like, "Hey, I'm eventually going to quit and become an entrepreneur. Can you give me advice?"
Yeah,
Like, that
you're
might
right.
sort of have some trouble in that context of, sort of trusting how much to entrust to this person who's going to in the midst of their exit strategy.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
so there might be
exactly.
like conversations you don't get to have with people until the timing is right.
Yeah, and but I will also encourage people. You know, I think everyone's not everyone necessarily, but a lot of people, probably the vast majority of people, their default is to kind of shell up and not share that much about their next journey and what they're going to do. And I can't tell you the number of whether it be exit emails or just kind of vague things about, oh, I'm going to go work for another company, or oh, my favorite is when people talk about in the past, like, yes, I worked for a Fortune 500 firm. I'm like, bro, this is 2021. I can go on your LinkedIn
Wait.
and see who you work for.
Well, isn't McDonald's
Yeah,
a Fortune
yeah.
500?
Details, details,
I know.
details. But yeah, so let's get back to the stories that we were talking about today. So we talked a little bit about what. Oh, before I do that, I can't not, because it popped in my head. There's a TED Talk that I'm going to link to after the post. We'll put it in the YouTube description. There's a TED Talk where a lady is talking about how, you know, you will be so surprised by if you put things out there and you set intentions and you ask people, you will be surprised what types of things could happen and who will come out of the woodwork to help you and all those types of things, right? And it's a really cool TED Talk, and there's an audience, and then she says, okay, so who in the audience has something that they're wanting to do or trying to do or whatever, and someone stands up or whatever, and they're like, I want to dance with Patrick Swayze. And they're like, okay, all right. Well, who in the audience? Is there anyone in the audience who can help with that? And then someone stands up. It's like, hey, I work at this spa. Patrick Swayze comes in once a year for like a week, and he's a super nice guy, and I think we could maybe make that happen. And it's just like, okay,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like a far out there type of thing. And then they go on to do a couple other examples, but the point being, like, just put it out there, ask, and tell more people about it, and you never know. Same kind of thing happens in the entrepreneur world. Like, oh, I have this idea, I don't want to share it because someone else is going to go do
Oh,
it.
yeah.
But no, it's quite the opposite.
Yeah, so I guess I have two things. One is, Reed, what do you want to do? what are you going to throw out into the universe right now?
Oh, right now. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great.
Just put you on the spot.
Put on the spot. Yeah. I'll keep it straightforward and simple, Ryder. I'm going to put out into the universe that this show on Friday is going to have 100 people, at least 100 people. By Friday is tomorrow.
Yeah, as in, okay. So we're going to go from 4 to 100.
Yes,
No.
we're going to get
I don't know how
100
many we
people
actually have
watching tomorrow. So that's the challenge. For any of you who are at home, guess what? This is a lovely challenge that you guys can help me with.
Yes, please pitch it to your friends, family, your pets.
Yes.
Like whoever will watch.
And I will emphasize, I mean, the main reason we want to be doing this is so we can start getting more engagement from the audience. Guess what? You guys, if you're listening to this, like, you're on the ground floor. And, I know we may not seem like much. I mean, have you seen Ryder's hair? I mean, look at that. Oh, my goodness.
Look at all that.
Crazy.
And
he even said he showered this week.
Yeah, but that was like that was a 3 weeks going without showering.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
tough to get all those oils out.
But yeah, you guys are on the ground floor. So if you guys come now and you participate, you can ask your question. You can be in the chat. Come to us with your life questions or problems, or even if it's just like, hey Reed, how do I do that thing on my phone you were talking about? Like, whatever you guys want. Guess what? If you're here now, there's a lot higher chance we're gonna engage with you than if you guys, in a few weeks, there's gonna be way too many people.
We're gonna blow up.
Yeah.
It's gonna. I can't wait. People always tell me how horrible fame is, but I've never really experienced.
There's only one way to find out,
right?
So that's my
take
intention.
Your word
yeah.
for it.
What about you,
Yeah.
Ryder? Let's
Yeah.
put the spotlight back on you.
Oh man, what would throw something out into the universe, huh? Yeah, I would like to. I guess. Never work again.
Hey,
Yeah,
that's a good one.
I would like to just do this, whatever this is, like being professionally writer and professionally read. I think that would be a blast to find some way, and I think that's a fascinating idea because then I think I could become even more whatever the hell I am if I had nothing else to focus on but becoming that, like chasing down all the curiosities and passions, and you get rid of the 8-hour-a-day job, and if that freed you up to just be yourself deeply for 8 more hours a day, what could you turn into? So these are the kind of things I'm excited about right now.
Yeah, and I think that's an amazing intention. And one term that came to mind is something called life design. And basically it's looking at your life and trying to decide exactly what it is you want that to look like. And then, backing up the steps to say, hey, how do we get that way? Because the reality is there aren't as many steps in between here and there that than you may think. And it only takes a couple of breaks or a couple of intentional things that happen for that to be enabled. So it's coincidentally something I was also talking with my clients about yesterday, and it was like, all right, we're ready. Like, we want to go to the next step. Like, how do we get from where we are here to over there? And like, all right, well, the first step is figure out where you're trying to go. And so that's good that you have that, at least loosely defined. And then the next step is to make those steps in between. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that on later shows.
Well, yeah, and this is, since this is about stories and we're talking about stories today, then part of it is the story that you tell yourself. And I think previously I've had other jobs where the story I told myself is, this sucks, but I didn't tell myself a positive story to displace that. And so that was kind of fascinating to start going like, you know what? Life doesn't suck. There's cool things. I'm doing cool stuff. There's a cool world out there and I'm going to jump in, right? And that sort of shifts the narrative a bit, which means that all of a sudden it went from being drudgery to excitement.
Yeah. And again, that subtle mindset shift, I think people on the whole really underestimate how big of a difference that can make, because again, like, you're barraged with inputs all day, and then you get to decide what you do with it. And yes, depending on who you are and your brain chemical balance and just how intense and numerous those inputs are and like your life situation, like, that can be harder for some people and easier for other people, right? And I'm sure there are some people out there who are like, Reed, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't have any problem with my mindset. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe that's perfectly fine. That that is how it is for some people, right? And
Yeah.
maybe you just have
Some
a good
people are
life.
perfect,
Yeah,
right?
some
Yeah.
people are, right? Or, sometimes I feel like we're just looking into a mirror.
I know, it's so amazing. Yeah.
Deep into the soul.
Yeah, this is the worst part for our viewers when you and I probably just go off on how amazing we
Yes.
are.
So if you want us to do less of this, make sure to help
Yeah.
us make true in
Oh,
our
do
intention.
we have a
Oh,
message?
look, we have a comment.
Thank you for interrupting us,
Oh,
Kenny.
perfect. Kenny says from 3 to 100. What a transition to the exact same thing I was going to say.
Yes.
If you want us to talk less about ourselves, please join
interrupt.
us in the chat. Come
Interrupt
tomorrow.
us.
Be that 100 and make it happen. And a little teaser for tomorrow. If you're like, oh my gosh, why would I want to come tomorrow? What more of this? Well, tomorrow we will be having music again. So we will have another cool experience with that. But yeah, so the stories we tell ourselves. I mean, that is one of the big things that I want us to focus on today is we are telling ourselves stories all the time, both about ourselves and about others. The others we'll talk a little bit more about crucial conversations in a second. But let's talk about the stories we tell ourselves. And I think that ties in really well with the mental health discussion we were having yesterday because, like you were talking about with the mindset, or whatever situation you're in, at the end of the day, the story you're telling yourself, the lens you're putting it on, that is what affects how you feel and how you view the world. It's almost like, if you put whatever these things are called, sunglasses on, like you now see the world differently.
Yeah, so this brings up, I guess, two fun things. One of them is I think there's the old John Carpenter movie, They Will Live or They Will Die. I can't remember. It has a kind of banal title, but it's basically they have ideology sunglasses that they put on. And it's Roddy Piper, the old WWF wrestler, is one of the main characters in it. And there's this insane 10-minute long fight scene in the middle of it where him and another guy are just throwing each other into dumpsters.
Nice.
But it has Barbara Kruger style, and she's an artist who does text-based graphics. And so every time you put these glasses on, the old advertisement will turn around and say something like obey, right? Or something like this. So all of a sudden you see through, all the words change their context and their meaning. So you go from a black and white world to a color world, or I think maybe that's reversed. But every time you put the glasses on, you can all of a sudden see clear. And this has been a constant sort of trope that has been in the world since the mid-1700s, I think. Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, actually talked about, it wasn't rose-tinted glasses, but I think he called them green glasses. That There were green-tinted glasses because the way that we take anything into the world is through perception, and those perceptions are filters. And interestingly enough, the way our ideas work also filters information so that we only see things through the filters that we have in place to see with, which is also, when we get further into cognitive psychology, you realize there are other ways to perceive the world, but unless you have the concept in mind, in place, you can't filter the world through that lens.
Yeah, and to go to the analogy we were using yesterday, where we are computers, we were talking about how every lens you have, every filter you have is effectively like a different operating system, a different software that you have loaded. And for me, I have Southern operating system, male operating system, Southern male operating system, Texan operating system. So it's a similar kind of thing where it's like having that operating system loaded, having those filters on. By the way, which you have them whether you realize it or not. So step one really is realizing it, right? And that's another thing where we're talking about stories and mental health and things like that, but it quickly comes into worldview and beliefs as well when things like racism or women's rights, gender equality, all those types of things. Well, guess what are those besides a bunch of filters or operating systems that you have yourself?
Right, and then what becomes really fascinating about that is that our minds seem to only be okay with holding so many filters at a time, right? Some of them are unconscious or subliminal or subconscious that we don't really even realize, but there are other ones that we can consciously choose to focus on, or we can choose to be open on things and just sandbox the ideas rather than trying to make immediate judgments. That's what's so fascinating about these stories. We were just talking about that. You hear a story and instantly you can jump to a conclusion. And this might be the story you tell to yourself about somebody else.
Yeah. So one last thing on stories that we tell ourselves. Well, so the first step is recognizing that you're telling these stories. Then the next step is recognizing that you have these lenses or these operating systems that affect how that story is from reality. Um, and then another thing, I was just going to kind of give an example, right? And, you know, you ever had a bad day, Ryder?
Well, once maybe.
One, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, today.
Right, right. Yeah,
Well,
that waking up was so hard today.
yes,
It's a
yes.
tough life.
No, so you know, when you're having a bad day or a bad week or whatever, it's regardless of if you have any sort of depression or whatever, we have a bad day. It can totally affect your view on the world and how things are going, and that is when you start to notice all of the little things that are going against you. You're like, oh, I'm walking through and oh, I bumped my elbow on the door frame. Ah, that sucks. Oh my gosh. And then it's like, oh, I dropped a pin. Oh, the pins are always dropping for me. My phone stops working like it always does every day. But oh my gosh, it froze up again. What the heck? Everything just becomes amplified and that much worse. And not is it just that much worse, but it feels like an attack on me. And like, oh, I just can't catch a break.
Yeah.
You ever said that phrase?
Oh, no, not really. Mostly I just start cussing immediately. But yeah, there's little things that have happened to me like this, and it does. You know, people say things like bad things come in threes or good things come in threes or whatever. But there does seem to be this chain reaction effect where it seems to be the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
We start looking for the threes because we think things are going to come in threes. You know, it's like, oh well, I spilled the salt. Oh well, I spilled my soda. What next? You know, and you're just looking for it, and you're primed to have another bad thing happen.
And it also can filter into your outputs, and it can change, you know, not only what your thoughts are, but that lens and that view, and, you know, some maybe even call it a fog. That, if it's a negative one especially, that can affect what you're doing outwardly. And, you know, I'll use the example of last Friday. I was feeling good, and it's like, okay, we just had this week of live streaming. We did it 4.5 hours of live streaming this week, largely improvised, and we were getting better every day and improving both the production thing and stuff behind the scenes, which is infinite, all the things go on behind the scenes, right? But I was feeling good, and I was like, hey, I thought things went well. I was glad to hear that we're moving forward, and yeah, and so I was like, this is a good day, this is a good week, it's worth, you know, kind of celebrating, having a good time. And I was in a nice mood, and I went and played disc golf, and I was playing better disc golf, and I was like, this is great, I'm having a good time. And then it also kind of affects how you're talking with people, and, you know, what kind of things you say to them. And yeah, I mean, have you had a day like that sometime in the last year where it's either been way positive or way negative, and you've seen that kind of affect the rest of the day?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's been a really fascinating thing, I think. And man, we don't need to keep bringing up the pandemic all the time, but during that time of having to sort of like isolate, then I became a little more tuned into my emotions. Before that, my wife just called me a robot, right? Like I was just, you know, I could just be on autopilot for months, just sort of operating in a mid territory of emotions or grayness, right? Not really seeing peaks or valleys. And what's kind of fascinating about getting out of that is all of a sudden you're more aware of your good days and your bad days, but you know, those peaks can be amazing and they can start feeding on themselves. And whenever I used to play sports, there were days where I would hit like a flow state. And what was fascinating is I played a lot of basketball, and there were days where I could throw the ball up any way I wanted to and it would go in. Like half court, whatever, it didn't matter. There were just days where everything aligns and it's perfect and it's amazing. And then after you've had that peak experience, it's really hard to go back out the next day and suck.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, you mentioned this flow state. Another phrase that is related to that is something called deep work. And basically, it's when you get into the zone, is another way some people say it. Like, you just get into the zone and everything starts clicking. And whether that's something like a sport or a video game or work, you know, it's like, oh, I'm really in this thing. I'm working on this problem. I got this thing. And the next thing you look up, and you're like, wow, time just flew and I just got so much done and things like that. You know, personally, that work thing is one that sometimes it's really hard to come by, right? The video game one, a little easier.
Yeah. Video games, that's something else that's kind of fascinating we could talk about at some point. Let's do a whole episode on that rather than me going off on the tangent now.
Yes, that's probably wise. That's probably wise.
So, when we're talking about things like crucial conversations, just to kind of come back to our workflow here, What do you remember who wrote the book? What's the sort of premise of it? Because I mean, the title seems to give some of it away.
Sure,
But yeah.
sure. I don't remember the author, so if any of our lovely viewers happen to be on their computer or device and you want to look that up and share in a comment the author, that would be helpful. If not, no worries, we'll add it afterwards.
Yeah.
But the Crucial Conversations, if you Google it or put it in Amazon, it'll be the first one that comes up. But the first step is recognizing the stories, right? And then the next step is changing the story and also changing your view. And then the last step is having that conversation. And you'll forgive me that these are the steps that I'm interpreting myself, and kind of these are my takeaways. These are not like he lined these out, step 1, 2, 3, right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, let's just use an example. Let's use a work example, right? Let's pretend. Well, here I'll let you volunteer an example. Is there a time at work where maybe now in hindsight you recognize that the story you were telling about someone, maybe it was a boss or a coworker, wasn't exactly lined up, and that led to some friction or something like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. There have been several occasions where, from my point of view, I was very correct, and turns
Just
out
several.
I mean, pretty much every time. Every time an idea pops in my mind, it is correct. Yeah, I mean, there have been times where I have been unfair to somebody because I was not seeing the world through their point of view, their lens. And the fascinating thing is, in this, when I was teaching college, this was fairly frequent because I think there's something about being a professor that, I don't know, your ego just inflates, or at least mine did. And so on occasion, I could, I think, just be a real jerk without it, or just making assumptions about the way things should work because I thought that would be best for me and for my students, without really paying attention to things like the way the entire college has to work in order to fund my ego.
Right.
Which is crazy. But the colleges, I worked at one college that was just fantastic about making sure I had anything I wanted. And when I look back on that now, I could request something. I need a digital lab. I need $40,000. And they would just be like, oh, okay. And I just, now when I think about that, I'm just like, these were just the most generous people. But at the time, I was thinking, of course they should give it
Yeah,
to
it
me,
almost made you
right?
drunk with power.
Yes, yes. And so these are these little things that I hop through on a daily basis. Not only that, but telling myself on occasion, I have a tendency to tell myself that this other faculty member, this other colleague or something is, they're not doing their job properly, or they are lazy, or whatever else. But I'm not going out of my way to talk to them. So how do I know any of
Right.
this?
Yeah, and another example that I wanted to bring up was one from this awkward social media type of thing when it's like, hey, I started a business and I want to tell you guys about it, meaning like friends, former coworkers, family, things like that. But I also don't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? Where it's like I'm in your face, and if we're on Facebook, for example, every single post is about, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, blah blah blah. Like, sure, some people are into that, some people like that, but I would say on the whole, the average person gets annoyed with that, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I'm very conscious about not doing that. But it becomes a flaw. It actually ends up hurting me because I'm not talking to people and I'm not in their minds, and I'm not, the saying in ads where it's like you need 10 impressions or whatever before something really sticks. But anyway, so a while back, I sent out an email. I think it was last fall, right after I finished creating Kickstart Your Kitchen, our first online course, Kickstart Your
Ta-da.
Kitchen, upskill. I don't know how to say that word. It just came out.
It's fun.
Yeah, take your cooking to the next level in as little as a weekend. You can check it out at kickstartyourkitchen.com. But right after we finished that, I sent out an email to basically, I had a list of people who had said, hey, I'm interested in kind of keep me up to date, basically. And so I sent out this email, and I spent a lot of time on it, and I thought it out, and I was trying to be that right balance of like, hey, here's the information, but I don't want to give too much to where it's like this giant wall of text, and it's a skill. I mean, it's harder than people would think, but then like, I only had a handful of people who responded or wrote back. And so naturally the story I tell in my head is like, wow, these people don't care about me at all. They just
Yeah,
like, wow,
yeah.
why are you bothering me with this email? And those types of things. And, and as I talked to some other people, as they were like and also just kind of seeing through some interactions, I realized that some of them felt like they needed to do some work off of my email because I had, put a couple things like, hey, check this out, or let me know what you think. And,
Yeah.
some people naturally like, I don't care, I'm not going to do that, right? Which is fine. That's expected. But some people are like, okay, I'm going to take some time and then I'll get back to you. And then they like, hey, I got to go do this work. And then guess what? Some people did it, and I was very helpful and gave me some good feedback and stuff like that. But that's like a couple people. Other people, they just thought as another thing to do. I'm imagining, right? And so then they never really did anything, right? So that's one example of where the stories. And oh, by the way, when I looked back at my email, I was like, oh, okay, I could see how this is interpreted that way, when in reality it's just like, hey, I'm just trying to tell you about this thing, check it out if you want. It's like a couple of sentences here and there. So again, it goes to, this is a subject we'll talk about in another episode as well, but the limitations of the media that you're talking in. And so that was over email and largely in written word. And if I was doing that today, I would be using video, or at least audio, to help give a lot of those nonverbal cues and the tone of the voice and things like that.
Yeah, which is, I think, a great tip that you've talked to me about. I think that's a really good one. Oh, and it looks like we have some comments.
Oh, yeah. All right, so here we go. Thanks to Libby. We've got Crucial Conversations, which has 4 authors, actually.
Ooh.
Oh, nope, that's not how that works. Let's try that again. Or maybe not. Let's try this one. All right, Crucial Conversations by Patterson... Jenny Mill. Oh, that's a long one. So there it is on the screen. I'll let you guys look it up. Thanks to Danielle and Libby. There are 4 authors: Carrie Patterson, Joseph Grinney, Ron McMillan, and Al Switzler. So yeah, thank you guys. Thank you ladies very much for sharing that. So that is a couple of examples from Writer and myself. And of course, if any of you guys in the chat have stories that you've realized that you've been telling wrong that you later on found out, feel free to share, whether you're live or after the fact.
Yeah, and I'll do a real quick kind of thing too that I talked about a little bit with Known yesterday, but I ended up having a conversation with somebody that I was a little bit vulnerable in. And that conversation led to further conversations that I think solidified a friendship that was more along the acquaintance level until that point. And sometimes I don't know whether or not that was a crucial conversation, but if that friendship was important to me, then yes, it was a crucial conversation to sort of cross that barrier. There have been other conversations where somebody's had to point out to me, no, in fact, you are wrong. And the funny thing about that is oftentimes we think as friends we should be just supportive. And every now and then your friend needs to come up and tell you, yeah, you need to just get over this or move past this.
Yeah.
And that's also a crucial conversation that's hard to have.
Yeah, for sure. And if Danielle, my wife, is listening, I think she'll love this one because I'm going to reference a story from high school. And she had a friend who, unfortunately for that friend, within their little group of things, she was the writer of the group. And she was the one who thought she was always right and, and thought she could walk on water. And I'm joking here, right? Yeah. But yeah, so she did something wrong in some situation. And Danielle was like, hey, like, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. And she came back to her and said, you're my friend. You're supposed to support me. You're supposed to be on my side. And Danielle was like, well, no, I'm your friend. I'm supposed to do exactly what you were saying, right?
Yes, flip the script, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't very long after that they were no longer friends. It's like, if you're not, like, this is what friends are supposed to do, and if you're not going to accept that from me, then you're probably not going to do it for me.
Right. Yeah. That's that kind of inversion logic. Like, take whatever it is, flip it, and take a look at it. Yeah, good friends should be hard on you on occasion, and the funny thing about that is if they handle it right, they're just having those conversations between you two, right? They're not trashing you outside of the conversation.
Right.
They're doing it because they care about you.
Yeah, and just real quick, I think we'll talk again about crucial conversations another day, and we'll do it more justice, and we'll talk more about the specifics and things like that. Today, I just wanted to bring it up because I think it's an important book, and honestly, if someone off the street was going to come up to me and offer, hey, what's like one book that you think could really improve my life, I would say this is one of the ones I would mention, if not the one,
Cool.
because it has so many implications. Because it's the stories you tell yourself, it's the stories you tell about others, and it affects you both in the work side and the family side, both with your if you have significant others or if you have children or other people in your life. It affects all of those things, and it's crazy because talking about that mindset shift after I read that book, I mean that has really stuck with me, because it changed the way that I view the world, and then also it changed the way that I approach these people and talk about these things. and
Right.
and so this is one of those books I think we talked about in another episode where in a lot of nonfiction books, they have a point that they're trying to make and a synopsis, and some people read the summary like, I got it, right?
Yeah.
Which I hope you guys don't do that with this book. This is especially one of the books where I think it's very important to go and see all the different stories and examples they give, because that's where you find out and it resonates with you and like, oh, okay, like, oh yeah, oh, that time somebody cut me off in their car, oh, that had nothing to do with me. Or, oh, hey, my coworker started being really mean to me. It's like, well, maybe they had other stuff going on in their life that you just weren't privy to, and it literally had nothing to do with that email you sent that you think they were mad about or whatever.
Right. Yeah, no, and this is fascinating to also think that there's people that have crazy stuff going on in their life, and you might be that third thing that just happened to them.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, normally they wouldn't react this way, but they did today, and that's kind of fascinating too, to just see that people can be different people on different days and
Yes.
reacting differently. I think there is something about how we have sort of an entitlement to our own kind of autonomy and space, and when people conflict with that, then we can get really fussy, really, really fussy.
Yes, amen to
and this
that.
is not something that's great. But once again, these are, as you mentioned earlier, those input outputs that we have cycling through us all the time. So we're taking input, we're also outputting stories, we're getting multiple things going at once. But a lot of this is perceptual. We perceive something probably without really consciously, rationally thinking about it, and we react almost immediately. We have stories that implant themselves in our brain instantly. Often these are stereotypes, or a lot of people have victimizing stories where they're always the victim of somebody else's actions, and it's because the world hates them,
Right.
or something like this. And you're just like, I don't think the world is thinking about you that much.
Amen to that, which is a great transition to Libby's comment, which I'm going to get to here in a second. But I wanted to point out this same, I need to maybe figure out exactly what the acronym is, the terminology or whatever, because I've been repeating it now over the last few weeks, and I've said it I think once or twice. But it's like stop, analyze, take a step out of yourself, analyze the situation, and then move forward. And that stop part can't be overemphasized. Like, hey, and it really doesn't need to be that long. Like, if somebody says something to you, especially if you find yourself triggered, or whether that means going inside, or whether that means anger, or whatever, some sort of emotion, especially if it's a strong one, your first step should be stop. Take a breath, by the way, which is, yesterday we were talking about a lot of times when you're off, something's weird, like, there's the Snickers commercial from Forever. Oh, you're not being yourself. Have a Snickers. Well, guess what? Because you're hungry, and that's a real thing. That was honestly a very good ad campaign I was a big fan of, because it helped remind people, like, look, if you're not right, check your basic needs. So yeah, another one is the breathing. Like, that's a technique that has existed for thousands of years, right? And it's just take a second and breathe. And for those of you who are maybe having a tough day right now, let's go ahead and just take 15 seconds right now, and you just take a deep breath in, and you hold it for a second, and then a deep breath out. And I know that may seem silly to some of you guys, but if you need to do this by yourself when you're in a closed room and no one's looking, no one's quote unquote judging you, then do that. But that's a little trick there. It's like, wow, okay, it really does help you. Physiologically, it has an effect by taking those deep, slow breaths. It helps slow you down. It helps cancel out that stress response we were talking about yesterday.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we are animals, right? So how do you, there's not a lion chasing me. That's just Karen texting me. I just got to deal with Karen. All right, take a breath. So stop, take that breath,
Yeah.
analyze the situation, and then also, yeah, turn that mirror back at yourself. Like, all right, what's going on with me? What's going on with the entire situation? Assess the entire system, and then act. Right?
Yeah, and of course this is can be easier said than done, but like there's little hacks you can give yourself, little tricks, and eventually you'll start recognizing these moments as they come up. I'm not great at it all the time, but I do things like I go for a walk before I answer certain emails. A 20-minute walk out in nature, breathing, and sometimes not even trying to think about the actual thing.
Yeah.
Just trying to clear your head and quite literally a focused effort on paying attention to the beauty of nature or the sky or birds or whatever it is. It'll totally flip the way that you come back and respond to that email, and so you respond to it in a positive light. And I found that that helps so many other things as far as job relationships and client relationships and things like that. So those are a couple things. On our little whiteboard we have a list of things that are all about perception, and one of them is, once again, let's talk about Andrew Huberman. He talks about how the physiology of breathing actually changes the dynamic where if you need to be attentive or focused, you can breathe rapidly and that will spike your adrenaline, just like as if you were in a fear response. So there are ways to hack your body to get it to respond the way that you need it to. And I say hack, but really these are just systems that in play, and we can sort of slightly tweak them to help modify ourselves. There's other things he talks about, which is one that's really interesting, is that our perception of time is based on blinking, the blink rate. So the longer your eyes are open or the quicker you're blinking will change the rate at which you perceive time, which is really fascinating to think about, because we like to think of time as like Newtonian, as this like linear thing. But if you've ever been in a car wreck, you know that time slows down as that car wreck is happening. And so there's little things like that that happen. Reed has mentioned that there's different animals and insects and things like that that perceive time differently. And of course, some of them only live for one day, so they darn well better perceive time differently, because
Yeah.
that sucks otherwise.
Yeah, there's some interesting videos. I don't have them offhand, right? But if you go on YouTube or whatever and look at animals perceiving time differently, and there's some cool videos where it shows you like, hey, here's your perspective on what that is, and here's what it is for a fly or a
Yes,
hummingbird
yeah.
or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, that time can be either really stretched out, where it's like they're on the order of milliseconds, whereas we're on the order of seconds, or maybe it's actually compressed, right? And for example, think about a tree that lives hundreds of years, right? And it's like, compared to us, that's like nothing, right?
Yeah. And these are just human conceits, right? That we think everything operates on our time scale, but of course geology doesn't. It operates on thousands or multi-million year time scales, and these are things that we really can't perceive. I mean, it would be fascinating if the mountains were having conversations right now, but we're just not capable of understanding
Well, that's
them.
why we put faces on those mountains, right?
Yeah, right. That's what you do. It's like it's happy.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's a. There's
Yeah, so real quick, I wanted to highlight a couple of things that Libby's saying in the chat, because
Yeah.
she was talking about one of the things that she had a revelation of, and I'm not going to put it on the screen because I need to figure out how to make it look a little nicer. But she was talking about, for her, one of the big revelations was that people are not judging her or concerned with what she's doing as much as she thought. They're wrapped up in their own world. And for her, she said that was a really freeing realization and a story that she rewrote for herself. And I think that is a very important thing to realize. And you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but guess what? People are all thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about you. Or at the very least, they're not thinking about you as much as you think you are.
No, it's not until you cut them off that they start thinking about you.
Exactly. No, but there's been studies on this, and I don't have them handy, so take them with a grain of salt what I'm saying. But the type of thing where it's like, an easy example is what I'm wearing. People care about what I wear.
Yeah.
And they had these experiments where people would go into a party or whatever, and they would wear something like outlandish or whatever, and then they would survey the people and be like, I don't know, or it's really, really small percentage of people actually noticed. Go ahead.
Oh, you've seen the little clip where they say count the number of times the ball is being passed, and while you're counting this ball being passed back and forth between kids, like a guy in a gorilla suit walks through, but you're so focused on counting that you don't see it.
Yes.
And this might be the thing for our lives. Most people are so wrapped up in their own narrative, narrating themselves to themselves, that they don't see anything or anyone else that's in front of them.
Amen to that. Yeah, and I will point that out, that applies both on many, many time scales. Like that is like right now in this moment. Are you present in that moment, or are you lost in your own world or your own thought, or focused on your own thing? That also applies to like a larger life time scale. And for example, kind of like you were referencing when you were in robot mode, just kind of, you said months almost disappeared. Like you were kind of lost in that just forward motion, just going. And I imagine you were
Yeah.
probably busy during this time, and you were doing a lot of things which you didn't have the time to think, or at least you didn't make the time to slow down and think and reflect. And so yeah, which is leads to another great comment from Libby, which she was talking about how the stop is really important. Think about what you're going to do, about what you agree to, being careful about what you agree to as well, because that's something that I'll get personal real quick. Dealing with our marriage, my Danielle and me, like it's a battle of what I want Danielle to do, what she wants me to do, largely what I want her to do. Let's be real. But then, and she's also a little bit of a people pleaser, which is great, but it's also bad. And so she will agree to doing something, even though she probably shouldn't. And I've actually tried to tell her, like,
Yeah.
hey, like push back on me, say no more. Kind of
Right.
like, I don't want to turn into Ryder and be like, hey, give me $40,000, give me this, give me that, and because she
Yeah.
would say yes, and she would be really nice about it, right?
Right. No, I mean, as long as you ask for a lot of money with a smile, I don't know why you shouldn't get it.
Amen to that. So yeah, just making sure, like, okay, so in her case, like, hey, stop for a second. Like, is that something that I really want to sign up to? And if so, like, what am I going to do to make sure that happens? And oh, maybe I don't want to sign up for that extra thing, right? Like, yeah, I know, Reed, you want me to, do this very particular way, but no, I'm not going to agree to that, because if I agree to everything you do, I'll go through my entire day thinking like, oh, I did this wrong. Reed wanted me to do it that way.
Or what does Reed want, right? Because
Yes.
you're actually living for Reed. At WW Reed D or RD,
Yes,
whatever.
exactly.
We'll end up like making bracelets around this, because that's the fascinating thing is we love people because they aren't us, and yet at the same time we're working so hard to change them into us. I found the contradiction in there to just be baffling, the way people attempt to control other people rather than sort of embracing them for their difference.
Yes, but there is a balance, right? And
Oh, of course,
and
yeah.
I'll be completely upfront with everyone. Like, this is something that Danielle and I are going to talk in therapy about, to see how we can do it a little better. Because the reality is like, she needs to change a little bit, I need to change a little bit, and we'll meet somewhere in the middle, right? Which leads to one other lovely comment from Libby. Libby, you get MVP for today. Thank you
Yeah,
so
for
much
sure.
for your
Thank you
thoughts.
for saving us from ourselves.
Yes, exactly. She brought up another great point from Crucial Conversations, is that there is always another option, right? It's very easy to get in these frameworks and these ruts, to use one of the words that you
Yeah.
used in the past, where you think this is the only thing. I can only do this thing. And I would bet that you're more likely to have that mindset the more you are in that robot mode. The more you just, I gotta keep doing, because there's
Yes,
no other
yes.
option, right? But there are always other options, and there are also unique solutions and ideas. And that's been one of my favorite things, as I've learned more and more about business, is like, yeah, like if you just change the structure of this deal to where you can align the incentives, it's better for everyone involved. And there's so many people and businesses and whatnot where they just aren't doing that reframing. And it's like, yeah, for example, as a solo entrepreneur early on, we don't have very much revenue. And so we need certain things. We need certain services and stuff to make the business work, but we don't have that much money right now. But I can set it up, and we can create deals where, hey, it's going to be a little bit of money right now, but you get this big upside as things grow. And so that helps mitigate your risk. That makes it easier for you, Mr. Company, and it makes it easier for me. So now we're both winning, and it's actually potentially a better situation. You have more upside than you would have had otherwise.
Right, and some of this comes back to those ruts that we're talking about. Some of those are imposed through society. It's not only that you have ruts, but society has ruts as well. And now what's fascinating is the difference between being stuck in a rut or stuck in a groove. Like when you're in a groove, sometimes you can think that this is all positive. And the rut would be the one that you can't escape from.
Right.
But what's fascinating is the deeper those ruts get, you never climb the wall to see over into the other ruts. You never see the other grooves that are going on outside, because you're so stuck and fixated in one place.
Yeah. And Libby, back at it again with a lovely comment here. Again, not the best visual, since I still need to fix my little overlay, but she said, if you agree to too much, it's okay to let go of something, right? And
Right.
so, to use the example of Danielle we were talking about, well, I would encourage Danielle, like, hey, if you realize throughout the day, like, this is, this is too much, let's come back to me like, hey, I know I agreed to this, but I realized afterwards, like, probably shouldn't do that, which is another thing they talk about in Crucial Conversations is, you may not know all those things in that conversation in that one time. And also, by the way, maybe now isn't the best time to have that conversation. Maybe you do need to go take that walk. Maybe you do need to take, and different people have differently, right? Like, some people want to talk about it right now in the moment. And other people are like, look, that's not how I best process things. I need to go away. I need to get out of this stress-induced response. I need to have some time to process it. And then we talk about it. Another technique is having different forms of communication. Like, this may sound silly to some people, right? But maybe I need to write something down. And then you need to say, hey, and I take that time on my own, reflect on how things have been going, and I write down, and then I give that letter to somebody, right? Or maybe I just use that to help me get my ideas and have the discussion. But really, it's about, hey, if there's some form of communication that is not working for you. So this is our challenge for today. This leads to our challenge, which is, who's someone in your life that maybe you guys aren't seeing eye to eye on something. Maybe you or they are telling some sort of story to each other or to yourselves, and that's affecting your relationship. So think of someone in your life who that might be, and then go try and have a conversation with them about it. Come from a place of loving, come from a place of caring, wanting the best for each other. Me and you versus the problem versus me versus you. Very important thing there. And go from there. So that's one of the challenges. And then if you don't have someone that immediately jumps to your mind, or you're still a little uncomfortable with that and you want to read the book first, perfectly fine. What about you? What are some stories that you have in your head? What are some ruts maybe that you're in that you are maybe could use a little bit of reframing? And I would encourage you to do some reflection yourself, but also reach out to us. Let us know. You can drop it here in the comments. You can go to our website, helpfulforlife.com, and you can hit the contact us button and send us a message. But yeah, because we want to hear from you guys, and we want to help you guys out with your problems, because guess what? If you're having that problem, somebody else is having that problem. And by you sharing and being vulnerable and helping, talking with us, and you can stay anonymous if you'd like, you are helping a lot of people who are going to be watching the show, because in case you didn't hear, we're going to have 100 people watching tomorrow.
100.
And that's just the beginning, because before long, we're going to be at 7 million.
Yeah, so get in on the ground floor now.
Get in on the ground floor now.
Foundational members.
Yes. And Danielle she really likes the bracelet idea. She's really leaning into it.
WWRD.
Yeah, actually, she made a slight reframe.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
She said, WRW. F what Reed wants. And honestly, I fully respect and enjoy those bracelets. I think we should totally make those. Well, yeah, so we have a couple of minutes here. So I wanted to tie back in one more time to our guest yesterday, Known Wells. And oh, by the way, before I say that, if as we're having these conversations yesterday or today, like, you find yourself really reeling back and kind of, I don't know, clenching and curling up or rolling your eyes, no offense to you, but maybe this is something that, like, maybe this is largely for you.
Right. When Reed was, when Known was saying things like, he goes, I might trigger some people. And I was thinking to myself, how could this guy trigger anybody? He just seems so nice, but I realized that has very little to do with him, right? That has to do with people not wanting into this soft space or not wanting to be open about certain things. And that can be triggering.
Yes, and I'm glad you said that phrase. That had nothing to do with him, because it's very central to what we're talking about today is, hey, a lot of what other people's actions have nothing to do with you. So that's another big point to take away from today. So I wanted to point out his website and his podcast one more time, and I wanted to show some graphics on screen because we didn't do that yesterday. So we'll switch over to that. So his collective that he started was the Feely Human Collective, which I think is a great name. But also the fact that it's called Feely Human, I mean, that is going to prevent some people from engaging because they're like, oh, I'm not about that, right? And as he said yesterday, it doesn't have to be.
I want to start one called Furry Human.
Furry Human. That probably exists. I would not be surprised. But yeah, check out the website, feelyhuman.co. And of course, the official podcast of feelyhuman.co is You, Me, Empathy. And, I wanted to play the music from the
Oh
intro
yeah, bring it.
with his permission, of course, because I actually really like it. So here is the intro music for it.
It's okay.
Empathy, empathy, empathy. La la la, la 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 la. You, you. Me. Empathy. Yeah. La la la.
So, as you said, how could you be mad? I feel like it's a very
Yeah.
warm, inviting, and of course, I love the la 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 la's.
Any song that has some nice la la la's in it.
Yes.
It's just, it's easy to sing along with. Too.
It is, but I also want to share the way that I hear it because it actually fits in quite nicely with what we were talking about earlier. Because I listen to a lot of things at 2 times speed because I need more inputs. But also just because especially a lot of people on podcasts and videos and things like that, they kind of have a slower pace, and you would be surprised how much information you can take in and how you can perceive things and move at a faster rate than you give yourself credit for. And that comes from you could do speed reading. There's one technique where it shows you a word at a time and you just look, and you would be surprised how fast you can read. And also just say, like, right now the average speed of an American is a page per minute or whatever. Like if you do certain techniques and you learn a skill, you can multiply that by, I don't know, 3. And again, I don't know these numbers off the top of my head, but you can change how quickly you are able to do these things. But anyways, the main point was to show you the intro music as I hear it, which it gives it a completely different feel. So let's go ahead and play that, which is at 2 times speed.
You and me. Empathy, empathy, empathy.
Empathy.
You. Me. Empathy.
I just like the sha-la-la-las get so much more. It's like, it's a different feel, right?
Yeah, no, it's totally upbeat all of a sudden. Like,
Yeah.
really upbeat. It's not a groove anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was funny because, that's kind of how I experience all of these little intros and stuff to podcasts. And it's funny because some people don't think about the fact that other people are going to listen to that pace. And I've had some where I'm like, I can't understand what's going on. And then I've had some where, like, I like them more slow, I like them more fast. It's interesting.
Yeah. And of course, that's a choice, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
All right. So the last thing I wanted to reference one little story from a podcast episode that I listened to from You, Me, Empathy, and I know we're at time here, but we're going to go a couple over. That was, if not his most recent episode, the second one back, and it's from Add to Cart is the guest, the people who are on the podcast Add to Cart. And the lady was talking about a story where she was in a CVS, and she was in line. There were like 5 people in front of her or something like that, and then some other lady walks up and she just kind of like cut the line, and she like went up to the counter, and there was this confusion about, is this self-checkout or are we waiting for the person or whatever. And then this girl, let's call her Susie was like, what's wrong with this girl? Like, did she not see there's a line? It's pretty straightforward. You can't just go up there or whatever. And then the lady who had skipped ahead, she came back and behind, and she tapped the Susie on the shoulder, and she said, I'm really sorry. I'm very hard of hearing, and ever since we've had all these masks, it's been really hard for me to hear what people say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Susie was talking about how she was like, whenever that girl tapped her on her shoulder, she was like shaking, and it took like control for her to not turn around and whack her with her purse. Like, she felt so amped up. And some of that is also because, like, oh, this girl's getting close to me. There's COVID things going on. Like, I don't know who this person is. And I think she was in Texas or one of the southern states where she's like, oh, who knows if this person's vaccinated and they're not wearing a mask or whatever. But then all of that just like faded away when she's like, dang, she just couldn't, she couldn't here.
Yeah, I do find that to be really fascinating too, right? Like we feel like the actions other people take are a personal affront to us. And it's, man, and then we get so worked up, and then you feel that adrenaline and that idea of shaking, right? And then getting stuck in a cycle where you are amping yourself up more and more and going down these, into these sort of horrible stories. And what it does to you physiologically, what it does to you mentally, what it does to you emotionally, that can be brutal.
Yeah. And I will close with a comment from Libby because she's been MVP for today. She says, transparency, honesty, and vulnerability is life-changing for everyone involved. So that is a great thing to go home with. And lastly, Ryder, what was our challenge for today so we can remind people? Let's see if you can remember.
Oh boy, something about stories. Okay, we got that.
Yeah, we got that. So I'll help you out a little bit.
I think it's re-examining. I think there were sort of two options, but one of them that I was thinking about was re-examining a story that I tell myself about myself. That is maybe some way that I move through the world that might be completely false, and I really need to take a hard look at it.
Yes. So the first part was looking at, or one of the parts was looking at a story that you tell yourself about yourself. And then the other one was, what are maybe some stories that you are telling yourself about other people? And even if you want to go as far as, hey, talking with that person about that, right? So let us know how that goes for you guys. We're going to check in tomorrow. So tomorrow, please let us know how the challenge went and if you had any kind of thoughts or things that kind of came up while that was going or feelings or whatever. But other than that, I think that wraps us up for today.
All right.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us on the morning show, Name to Be Changed, Tagline to Be Changed. And please join us tomorrow and invite a friend or 99 because we need to get 100 people to watch tomorrow live.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm going to comb my hair.
Yeah.
It'll be fantastic.
Yes, he's going to comb his hair. This is the reason it's been holding us back.
Unless 100 people are looking at me, I will not comb my hair.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, tomorrow, and encourage both yourself and others. Like, you don't have to be sitting here watching at our mean mugs the whole time. Just put it on in the background. Make us a part of your morning routine. We want to be a great way for people to start the day. So just start listening along, have it on the background while you're doing your hair like the writer likes to do, while you're sitting on the toilet texting your friends. Put us in your life however you want to fit. But one of our goals with this show is you leave this show better every day, and we give you one action, one small step you can take every day to make yourself better. And as we've talked about multiple times on this podcast, if you're doing just a little bit every day to improve yourself, you will be a completely different person in a matter of time, a week, a month, a day, a year. Like, you will literally be different and you will be better. So get better with us.
Yes, please, for our sake.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.